This is the journey, this is the art, this is the work by Robert Motherwell, abstract expressionist artist. Enjoy, please. Thank you. Robert Motherwell, one of the great painters of abstract expressionism, is renowned for his work in painting, print and collage that combine a new visual language of gestural abstraction. Deeply informed by Henri Matisse, Motherwell strove to liberate color and line from its strict descriptive role and demonstrate its potential as a device by which profound emotion could be expressed with simple means. Alongside Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, and Willem de Kooning, Robert Motherwell is one of the great American abstract expressionist painters. His expressive canvases and collages resulted from a profound dedication to automatism, a method of spontaneous creation that attempts to express the inner workings of the human psyche.
What was the journey? What was the search? It was an embattled group. All the weapons of the Renaissance tradition totally discarded. It was a mission to make painting in America the equal to painting elsewhere. It was not exactly a heroic journey. In fact, it was filled with desperation, depression. In the history of all art, there was never a movement as hated as abstract expressionism. Jackson Pollock was a wild person, an alcoholic, filled with anger and rage and so on. And at a certain moment, he took huge canvases and put them on the floor and began to drip on them, and it shattered the conventional ideas of composition and all the rest of it. But they are composed like dance. He literally danced over the canvas, and all the marks are his tracks. And so they're about life and death. And many people find them phallic or sexual. And that's all right with me too. Sexuality and death are the most basic themes in human existence, except birth. The thing becomes an obsession, because I still haven't painted the ultimate one, and probably will die without having painted it, or maybe already have painted it, because there are 150 and don't realize that that one is the really echt one. We simply lived in the village and went about this enterprise. And there is a kind of freedom in being ignored, but a depressed freedom, because if nobody gave a damn what we were doing, why not do anything you want to? Being comrades was very simple, because we all lived within a block or two or three or four and went to the same Chinese restaurants, which was all we could afford, or to the Cedar Bar and so on. And there was a real camaraderie. Everybody that we knew was a modernist in one way or another. Of course, there was the marvelous freedom, but there was also a brutal price to be paid. De Kooning got very ill one year and was sent to Welfare Island. And I still remember his rage in speaking that first they deloused him. When Baziotes had his first show, I helped him hang it. And I still remember when it was all hung and we were looking at it in silence, and suddenly he said, "Look, Bob, you're the only person I trust. If these pictures aren't any good, tell me, and I'll take them down. I'd rather not have the show than if it's not first rate." And the work was so new, of course I reassured him, but I didn't know myself how good it was. All of us were filled with anxiety. Our knowledge of collage was minimal. And, but at any rate, we decided to try it. What did we have to lose? Pollock suggested that we do it together. We had a pot of glue, and I'd brought some varied materials, and his studio had lots of things. And both of us would work, you know, whereas one would be in school, of sort of what the other person was doing, but not looking over his shoulder. And we didn't discuss it very much. But in a way, we both acted as though we were in kindergarten. A few days later, my friend Matt dropped by, and he said, "Those are really you, I can tell." And he said, "Why don't you make some bigger ones and more of them," and so on. And with that encouragement, then I went on, and for a long time, I was the only American painter who also continually made collages. I used to reflect occasionally, why is it that I took to collaging like a duck to water? And then I remembered that I spent the year 38, 39 in Paris. I stayed with a French family on pension, and in the evening, sometimes after dinner, would go to the Café de Magot. Picasso was very often at a corner table surrounded by friends, and I realized soon that they were writers. And Picasso would scan the room, looking at everybody, and while he was scanning the room, without looking at what was in front of him, say the coffee cup and saucer and his package of cigarettes, a piece of silver or two, and the napkin, and he would keep moving them, especially on the surface of the table, which had a white tablecloth, so that the gauloise bleu showed vividly. And I had never seen a collage, but at that moment, there was something about the way Picasso left it that really moved my heart irrationally. And one day it occurred to me, years afterward, of course I took to it like a duck to water. I had watched the inventor of collaging making them at the cafe table. Pollock killed himself in an automobile accident, drunk as a lord. Franz Kline had a terrible heart condition and was told to quit smoking and drinking or he'd last about a year. And he refused and died. I had a real painting block. I simply couldn't paint. It was a very hot summer, and I had a studio on 3rd Avenue that was suffocating. Somehow, the old definition of surrealism came back to me, to work without a priori judgment. And I thought, why not just make a stack of things, make it as a rule of the game, that I don't judge them, change them, I just go on and on and on. I had them all on the floor in long rows, and I painted naked because I was bathed in sweat. A lot of my sweat dropped onto the papers. I arrived at 565 on a Saturday afternoon and realized I'd broken through. And the next day I didn't work, and I got a telephone call that David Smith had been in a terrible automobile accident and he died. I was never able to continue the series after that. I don't know why. It was almost as though they were unlucky. The abstract expressionist group is a group of allies rather than a group of identity, because each person has his own imagination to the hilt. I mean, Rothko and Pollock and Gottlieb or Clyfford Still, you could hardly find more disparate modes of expression, and yet all are highly infused with sheer imaginativeness. Generally, I use each color as simply symbolic. Ochre for the earth, green for the grass, blue for the sky and sea. But mainly, I use black and white. They tend to be the protagonists. When I use black, I don't use it in the way that most people think of it, as the ultimate tone of darkness, but as much a color as white or vermilion, or lemon yellow or purple. Black is technically not a color, non-being, if you like. Then what is more natural than a passionate interest in juxtaposing black and white, being and non-being, life and death? It's a little too far. Yeah. It's really an amazing picture. One of the difficulties in the 40s was that the nature of abstraction wasn't really very clearly understood, even by many of the artists who got their sense of abstraction from looking at abstract pictures, but didn't understand the principle. It's got something, and yet it's off. The word abstraction comes from the Latin, meaning to take from. This I got from Alfred North Whitehead at Harvard. And the function of abstraction is what he calls emphasis, to throw the thrust of the work onto its meaning. I think I was too uptight when I painted the black shade. You see, what was marvelous about understanding it this way is then you instantly understood that the function of abstraction is to get rid of a lot of reality. You start with as much richness as you want and subtract. And then you arrive at the residue of essences that you're interested in. And that perception did for me what the discovery of perspective did for the Quattrocento painters. It became an organizing principle. This Matisse head is a beautiful example of a high degree of abstraction, but still clearly visible as a realistic image. Actually, it's made out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 lines. And yet it's the presence of femininity, it's a head, it's everything. What has the enterprise been all about? What was the journey? What was the search? It turned out to be for a certain aesthetic, which is not simply a question of beauty or artfulness, but of attitude toward reality. That one works. I'm not sure this one does. The process of painting is the search, and it in some way involves a high degree of abstraction, but at the same time with an insistence that the subject, which in a way is unnameable, nevertheless is very humanly poetic. I've had a certain faith that the enterprise is worth it, is the only thing worthwhile for me to expend my life on, and what the ultimate consequences are, the ultimate results, and so on, is really for me not in a way even to say. If it weren't for the shock of recognition in a few other people, that at times I succeed in that, my work would disappear. We've talked a lot about the hard circumstances of the abstract expressionists. I think if everybody had been rich and famous from the beginning, the story would be exactly the same. And I mean, and that's part of what I mean by truth and authenticity and integrity. The game is not about worldly success. The real game is between oneself and that virgin canvas to end up with a canvas that is no less beautiful than the empty canvas is to begin with. After 73 years, I can still make an awful picture. After 73 years, I'm just beginning to learn the rudiments of painting. I would like to live long enough, but I think it would take till the 21st century to have something of a sense that I know how to paint.